So this is the same file that you had. It's with the solutions here on the right. And notice how, we're looking at 30 here, sometimes there are equivalent ways of saying things, and they're provably equivalent, and I give you both possibilities. If there's only one possibility, because that's the only correct answer, if I say or here in normal English and I give you two possibilities, either is fine. So for 30, right, ghosts don't exist. So it is not the case that there exists an X such that this X is a ghost, right? It's not the case that you'll ever find something in the world. It's not the case that you'll even find one, not even one thing that is a ghost. And you could also say, for anything, just go out into the world, anything, Nigel, look everywhere, scour the whole universe, pick it up, and I'm telling you, it ain't going to be a ghost. They're the same thing, yeah. And they're provably the same thing. So for what it's worth, if this was a logic class, I'd show you how, just without relying just on our intuitions and my rewording, we can demonstrate that these are equivalent, right? So they're saying exactly the same thing, just differently. There's not a single one, or anything you look, it won't be that way. Right, that's the same thing. All right, so I'm looking at the numbers here. I think 26 is the smallest one. Let's look at that. And again, I don't know these things by heart, so I'll have to look at it myself, and then you'll tell me what your issues were. Jaden says, I am firm, you are stubborn, and he is obstinate. I was confused. Cool. All right. Let's do 12. And when we do this, I'm just going to give myself lots of space here because I don't want visual clutter. I just want to make sure I only have one on my screen at any given time, because I feel like otherwise, I personally feel like it's a oopsie. So I really got to put my cursor at the right place. I don't want to have too much clutter. So visually, we're all looking at 12 and only 12. All right. I am firm, you are stubborn, and he is obstinate. Being firm, repeatable or unrepeatable? Totally being repeatable, right? Yeah. And I, you, and he, these are particulars we care which, right? They're specific people. And then Jaden just told me, I'm confused on why I need brackets. You do need brackets for the only reason that, and this is not going to be a fancy reason, so you're going to be unimpressed by this. When we say and, it is always just a two-place relation. So there's a place on the left-hand side, and there's a place on the right-hand side, right? And we always want to treat it as a two-place relation, such that if you want to string together more, obstinate means you're stubborn. So you can look that up, Shane. And so if you want to string more than one more than one conjunction, you just take, we could have easily have paired them this way. So instead of pairing it this way that we did with the parentheses, this would also have been fine. You just have to group them. So in this case, what's on the left-hand side of the and is this, and what's on the right-hand side is this, right? And in another version, if you were to put the parentheses, and this would be equally fine. And I suppose I could have put that in the solutions, but it's really not worth retyping. What you would have had, Nigel, is the following. Let me just type that out. And folks, you're going to give me a moment to do this because I can't read what's in the chats while I'm doing all this stuff. So just hold on and let me finish this one thought. So if you're looking here, right, it says I is F and Y is S and H is O. And the brackets are just to ensure that if you look here, this particular conjunction or and is a two-place relation. I'm underlining its left-hand conjunct, as we call them, and right-hand conjunct. And same for here, right? But these would both be fine. So Jaden, if you did that, the brackets would be fine. What wouldn't be fine is something like, I'll put these in green just to tell you they're fine. So just green is going to mean good, bad, red is going to mean bad. So let me switch to red. This would not have been fine. If I say this conjunction, this conjunction, this, that would not have been fine. In fact, these would be completely needless, right? And here we wouldn't know, for instance, we couldn't be you treating them pairwise. That's it. Yeah, that's the only reason, Jaden. And it's procedural, is because if we're doing proofs in logic, we want to just treat them pairwise. Kind of like if we're all holding hands around a fire, right? Both of us have a right and a left hand. We're all holding hands, but we're all just holding a person to our left and a person to our right. And you can iterate that. The person I'm holding is holding me, and it could also hold someone else, but we just want to put the brackets around that. Jaden and everybody else, did that explanation make sense? Yeah, conjunctions can only be in pairs or they're two-place relations. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not to say that there are only two-place relations in the world. we're going to encounter some three-place relations and so on, but conjunctions just are that. You can iterate though, and you do the same logical work. All right, so that was 12. I'm going back in the chat and I'm having a look at what the next smallest number was. I believe it was 26. And again, I'm I want to stay sharp. I don't know exactly what's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move things out so that all I'm looking at any given moment is the one proposition that concerns me. All right, here we go. All right. Everything natural is made of atoms and is in principle detectable. All right. Shoot. Michael, this was yours, I believe. So what was the issue with this? And then I'll reread this in my para language, and then you can tell me if that snaps into place. So Michael is going to share with us what his puzzlement was for that. My only question with this is, I don't know whether universal quantifiers can be bound to names or only variables. You never quantify over a name, Michael. So if that's your question, so you never quantify over a thing you care which. You know exactly which one it is. It's singular. It's not just there's only one. It's absolutely singular. So if I'm talking about Michael as in you don't quantify over it. I don't say there is a Michael. I don't say for all Michaels. It's just you never quantify over a letter A, B, C, and so on. The things you name, the particulars you care which, you just never, they're never bound to one of these quantifiers. Does that answer your question, Michael? Yeah. And there's tricky questions about what names do after that, right? Because it does seem implicit. Like, suppose I say Michael is a great student, right? So let's agree on this following, right? G stands for ... is a great student. I'm going to butter you up for a moment, Michael, so bear with me. And let's agree that lowercase m is going to mean Michael, right? And then I'm going to go and make a claim if we agree that that's the predicate, and I want this to be lowercase. Thank you. So this means is a great student. That's a repeatable. Michael is completely unrepeatable. Again, I'm going to spell your name properly. Lowercase m, we don't put X, Y, Z because it's a particular we care which. I can say Michael is a great student. I don't need to put any quantifiers. That is it. And if you look at the very, very beginning, that's where I got you started, right? Tobias is bored, right? That's where I got you started with particulars we care which, because I feel like they're a little easier to wrap your mind around. Now, there's an interesting thing that you can do, right? Because at one point you're going to be like, therefore, notice how you can extract this. You can say, surely if Michael is a great student, there exists at least one X such that this X is a great student. There's at least one thing in the universe that's a great student. We can do that, right? And that's perfectly fine because Michael, we know, is part of reality. He's here right now in our class. But what happens, let's say, if I say Clark Kent is a great student, and I say Clark Kent is a great student, Clark Kent doesn't exist. This is what our reading is going to be about, non-existent objects. And then we don't want to find ourselves inferring, like, let's say Clark Kent flies, or let's get a superpower, or shoots lasers from his eyes, right? Shoots lasers from his eyes. And just a refresher, everyone, who's Clark Kent? Alter ego, also known as, thank you, my fanboys out there, Superman. All right, so Clark Kent is Superman. Well, actually, let's just go ahead and put Superman. Why not? Since that's sort of who we're concerned with and that's who we know, right? Shoots lasers from his eyes is going to be S, let's say. And Superman's going to be S. That's going to be, well, actually, let's put lasers as L, less confusing. And I don't want to be able to, it's going to be kind of puzzling, and this is what our reading is going to be about today. You don't want to say this. Look, it's true that Superman shoots lasers from his eyes. But this is true. So I'm going to put this here in green. But you don't want to find yourself now inferring the following, that there exists at least one thing such that this thing shoots lasers from its eyes. That part's now tricky, right? And that's what we're going to be trying to find a way out of with our class today. We're going to have a reading on how do we find our way out of this conundrum, right? But you don't quantify over the S, you quantify over the X. You don't quantify over particulars we care which, you only quantify over particulars we care not which. That's where you put your there is an X. So you never want to say something like there is an S, right? You never want to say this. There is an S. That would be what we call an ill-formed formula. That would be incorrect. I'm going to put this in green. You never want to find a situation like this. Michael and everybody else, is that clear, or you have a question? Cool. All right, so let me backtrack here. And this is a preview of why we're going to be doing the work we're going to be doing today in ontology. Let me just backtrack and go back to the correct answer, because now Michael asked about the conditional. So notice here, if you were saying for all things in the universe, this is a big request. So just be mindful whenever you've got this upside down A, this universal quantifier. Look, I'm asking you to scour the whole universe. That's a pretty big thing. Be careful what you say next. Every time you see that inverted A, you're ranging over what? You're ranging over everything. You say, for anything you could find. Well, be careful now. So you say, look, for anything you can find in the world, because this said everything is natural and everything natural is made of atoms and is in principle detectable. This is saying for anything you go out in the world and you find, if it's natural, so if that X that you found, so I come face to face with something. All right, I got to look up this. All right, so I'm looking around. I come face to face with like my mug. For everything, all right, cool, I'm in front of my mug. Is it natural? If it's natural, then a mug will be made of atoms and detectable. Cool. All right, next thing. I'm going around because I said for all X. Let's go find something else. I'm grabbing my cat. Is it natural? Well, if it is, then that X, which is now my cat, is going to be made of atoms and is going to be detectable. And so on and so on and so on, and you go. And the reason why we use the if then is because we want to restrict ourselves not to everything, right? This is everything, but this is saying, no. Go to the subset of things that are natural. And I would exclude presumably the supernatural. The supernatural ghosts, for instance, would not be made of atoms and be in principle detectable. Let's say your mind or your soul or whatever would not be natural. But if it is natural, then it will be made of atoms and it will be detectable. That's what it's saying. And the if clause here, right, what comes before the if then, that restricts the field, right? So as I'm going around, let's say I come face to face with the ghost. Oh, that's not natural. Move on. And I keep on moving on. But if it is natural, like my mug and my cat, then it will demonstrate these things. Is that clearer, Michael and everybody else? That's what that does. I'm putting the antecedent of my conditional, the part of the if, and it narrows down the field. Yeah. Because otherwise, you're sweeping over everything, and there's hardly anything you can say. Yeah, light's natural. Yeah, lots of things are natural, and if they're natural, then they're made of atoms and in principle detectable. And so if you say, well, light's natural and it's not made of atoms, then I would just say that this entire thing is false. The claim is false. It's making a false claim. But a false claim, nevertheless, is a claim, and all we're doing is learning how to express it more in a more focused manner. Yeah. So if you've done some physics, you'd realize that this is actually not a true claim. Doesn't matter. We're not concerned with truth or falsehood. We're concerned with only translating it in this. I can also say, right, that anything, and that's where we're going to sort it out. That's where the scientists to sort out. Yeah. It clears your question, Mandeep. Terrific. I'm glad it does. Let's have a look. I had 28, but that was from Michael as well. Mandeep had 33. 38 showed up for Xander. Let's look at 28, and then let's keep going. Let's see what that does. All right. All skyscrapers are building. Do you want to skip that one, Michael? Did that one fall into place, or do you have an issue with that one? Same confusion. Yeah. So let's work through it again, just so that everyone's extra clear on it. I'm just going to work through it again, right? And I'm going to have some fun here. Let's just make sure that's the only thing on the screen. What happens if I switch this? So this is correct. So I'm going to put this in green. I'm going to put it to the side just so that we remember that it's the correct thing. But I'm going to make a variation on it. And the variation I'm going to make is incorrect. And I want us to bite down with our teeth to understand why it's incorrect. So I'm going to put this in red, and it's incorrect. Someone try to tell me, in your own words, why is this formulation in red incorrect? An incorrect way of symbolizing what we have on the left. Why is this incorrect? Michael says, you got it. Michael says, everything is saying that everything is a skyscraper and a building. That's exactly what that says, right? It says for everything, that thing you're going to find is going to be a skyscraper and it's going to be a building, right? So that's what that's saying. That's way too strong. This is so manifestly false. And that is not at all what this is saying. It's saying that all skyscrapers are buildings. It's not saying that everything is a skyscraper and a building. Again, be very careful. If you say universal quantifier something, right? This inverted A, you're ranging over everything. So unless you really restrict the scope by plugging it a condition, right? It has to meet the following condition. On the condition that it's a skyscraper, you should be able to discover that it's a building. But if you don't place that condition, you're still sweeping over everything. And that's telling you that everything you're going to find should be a skyscraper and a building. And of course, that's not at all what this is saying. What you'd have to say is that everything is literally what that would model. Everything is a skyscraper and a building. Both a skyscraper, right? If you want to make it more explicit, is both a skyscraper and a building. Hey, look, this is a sentence you might want to utter, but it's manifestly false, but it would be a correct modeling on the right. This would be a perfect way of modeling that sentence, but that is not what the sentence in black is saying. The sentence in black is saying all skyscrapers, so restricting yourself only to those. If you find a skyscraper, look carefully, you should discover that it's a building. And that's what this is saying. That's what this is saying. Right? Yeah. And if the word tall doesn't show up for skyscrapers, buildings are just buildings, by the way. It's just a dwelling, right? So it's just my house is a building, but it's not a skyscraper. All skyscrapers are buildings, by the way, but not all buildings are skyscrapers, just if you want to know. Because a shed in the back of your house is a building, but it's not a skyscraper. But all skyscrapers are buildings. This is the species to the genus. Is that helpful, everyone? Can everyone see why that would have been wrong? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. And again, we just look at the nitpicking we're doing. That's what the logic's for. Splitting hairs. Splitting hairs. Who verifies whether these claims are true? The scientist. Right? Remember our image. We sit in our armchair with our elbow patches. We just think sharp. We just think more hard. That's what we do. The scientist has to go get wet and put on some boots and go check stuff out. All right, that was 28. I'm going to keep, again, moving up the numbers. I believe we have next in line 30. I think Devin was asking. Let's go for 30. Devin, we spoke to this a moment ago. Is that falling into place, Devin, or is there still something you'd like to explore with that one? Yeah, it fell into place, yeah. And again, I want to just repeat it, right? Because I feel like, I don't know intuitively which one, snaps more into place, but I'm going to give them a paraphrase and I'll write them here, right? There is no, let me write this again. It is not the case, and here I'm paraphrasing the symbolization right above. It is not the case that, what? It's not the case that there exists a thing such that this thing is a ghost. That's what this is saying. It's not the case that, let's put that in red and color coded. It's not the case that there exists a thing. Let's put all of that, let's say orange. There exists a thing. We'll put all of that in. It's hard to select just that. Hello, I'd like it just orange, please. There exists. Actually, I'm going to be even more fine grained. Put this in green, right? It is not the case that, green, please. There we go. It is not the case that, that's in red, there exists a thing. What thing? Don't know a particular, but we don't care not which, such as this thing is a ghost. And let's get myself another color. What would be a good color for ghost? There we go. This weird color. Now for J over here. That's what that says. I'm having fun here with color coding. And then what this one says is, go find anything you want, and pick anything. So like for everything you'll find. Let's go for everything. For everything you can find in the whole universe, and all of that is for everything you can find in the whole universe. Just is to say, what did I use earlier? This color here. This is my quantifier, right? It won't be a ghost. It won't be a ghost. And it won't be a ghost is this, let's do this a little more coarse grained here. It won't be a ghost. That is it. That is it. Just intuitively, which one snaps a little more for you? This formulation at the bottom or this formulation at the top for expressing ghosts don't exist? Being a ghost is a repeatable thing. Yeah, so This is a ghost. That's a ghost. Being a ghost is a repeatable thing, Kai. Everybody else, which one snaps a little more into place for you? Which one is you find more intuitive? There's got two ways that are logically equivalent of saying the same thing. And Michael, you got a technical question that I'll answer. Your questions have been generally of a philosophical nature that's a little ahead of the curve, but I'll go ahead and answer that question. Michael asks the following. Why can't I not say this? So, this. Why can't I do this? All right, let's take this apart. I'll put it in red because it's incorrect, but we're going to pick this apart. Michael, is that your question? No? Well, let's have fun with this for a moment. Let's pick this one apart and then we'll get to yours. All right, so what's wrong with this? G is what? If I say a lowercase g, what am I saying? Yeah, Kai, you got it. I just said being a ghost is a repeatable thing. Now I'm treating it like ghost is your name. Ghost is the name of a particular thing. So that's wrong. Unless that's the case, right? You can imagine in some cartoon, something's called Ghost, right? The movie Ghost is called Ghost, right? And you don't want to, and so you don't want to say there is no, that's just wrong, right? So that's not gonna, you don't want to graft a quantifier over that. So there you go. Michael says, not an existential require, E is a predicate. What's the predicate of? Are we still at this sentence? For existence, you're inventing a predicate exists. All right. So existence, and we'll see this today, existence is not a predicate, right? So here's the thing, right? Suppose I say this. E, and let me see if that captures your concern, means exists. Is this what you're suggesting? Capital case, uppercase E as the predicate for exists, right? And then you'd want to say something. Okay, cool. And then you want to say, let's say Michael, let's go back to you, right? And I want to make this a lowercase m, please. Please don't auto format this. And I want to say Michael. And Michael, just a quick confirmation, you exist. Just go, give me yes in the chat so I make a true statement. It's always preferable to go on true statements. All right, cool. All right. And so you're wondering, why is it that we can't do this? Why is it that we can't do this? Well, the whole point of the quantifier, and here's my answer, the whole point of saying exists is that you can say that. It's perfectly fine. And let me be clear. Michael exists is perfectly fine. I'm not saying you can't say that. The question is, when we're building our tools, do we want to build silly tools or useful tools? And we want to build useful tools. And we want to tease apart the moment when we say that something exists such that there's at least one, right? That's the quantifier that does the work. And it's not a predicate. And you land yourself into all sorts of problems when you talk about existence as a predicate. And one of the consequences, if you do philosophy of religion, Kant went down on this, is the so-called ontological proof of God's existence, whatever. You're going to run into problems, right? And then you're going to end up saying this. How about this, Michael? So I'm going to take this sentence and hold on, Kai, hold that thought. And I'm going to go back to what I did earlier. So remember earlier when I talked about Michael is a good student, and I said, if Michael is a good student, I can infer from that premise that there exists at least one thing such that this thing is a good student. Well, here, surely the same applies. I can say there exists at least one X such that X exists. Well, I've just said a tautology that's not informative, and you can see why if I used is exists and allowed it to be a predicate, I'd be kind of saying vacuous things that are already accounted for by the symbol that I just selected now. Can everyone see that? The conclusion here is not really helpful. It's not saying much anymore. There's an X such that this X, there is an X such that there is an X. It's like, yeah, true, right? That's not super helpful. So we just tease that apart, Michael. There's a moment when we want to say, and this is what's beautiful about the existential quantifier. And notice how we also want to specify at least one. So we're saying, right, there's at least one, there could be more, whereas exist would mean that's a singular thing could exist, where at least one leaves the door open for more also, right? So it lets us talk about classes and so on. So Michael, that's my complicated and sophisticated philosophical answer to that question. It's just that it's going to land us into trouble, and we precisely want to tease apart the predicate, the things that are repeatable, from the moments when we say that something exists. And an additional question is, it's not clear to me, by the way, that this is a repeatable. So let me say, this is another more philosophical consideration. It's not clear to me that this is a repeatable. So here's the thing. Think of yourself, for instance, right now. So all of you individually, you all exist. Kyla, you exist. Devin, you exist. Shane, Blue, Xander, you all exist. But the existence that you have, because you can confirm that you exist, if anything can, is in some sense, very singular. Only singular things exist, right? You occupy a place in the universe and you exist, but it's not clear that you and I exist in the same manner. Think about thisness as opposed to suchness. What falls under the rubric of a predicate is suchness. But when we say that something exists, there's a thisness that comes with that. This exists. And you and I are both humans. We share a lot of traits in common, but I exist in a manner that seems to be unique to me here and now, spatially, temporally, and so on, such that if I get wiped out of the universe, you don't, right? If I get wiped out of the universe, you don't. Do we agree on that? Type in agree if you agree. Mark gets wiped out, like Zeus comes from above, says, pow, pulls me off. You're fine. You're fine. I have my existence individually, right? And so existence seems to be this particular thing exists, this particular thing exists, and it exists in its business and individually. So it seems like a category mistake to talk about it as a repeatable thing. Although you can say of the things that it is true that Michael exists, that you can say. And you can say Mark exists, and that's also true, right? And lots of things exist, but you have your existence particularly, I have my existence particularly, and it can be true here and it can be true here without us believing that this is a repeatable thing. It's actually unique. You cross out Mark, and Michael goes on just fine. Yeah, that's my long-winded answer. Michael, that opens some doors, but I think it closes a few. Is that okay? Again, I think we're looking at cool. All right. And Michael's very curious. I'm looking at the clock. It's 1:44. I said we'd spend 30 minutes max on this. Our 30 minutes has expired. But as I said, we'll swing back to some more logic near the end. Just want to check in with everyone. Was that helpful? We toyed a little bit. The more we toy, the better it gets. But was this helpful? 30 minutes of doing a little bit of logic. I no need to apologize, Michael. It's bringing us on topic. If I felt it would have been off topic, I would have answered it. But we are circling. This is the beautiful thing about metaphysics. These concerns are our full plate. This is our main dish. So let's do our main dish. Let's do some ontology now. Let's actually start our reading. This is going to be fun. And so what you can do now is sit back, enjoy the show. You will be using the chat, but a little less so. I'm going to be reading this out as if this was kind of like an audiobook with like the possibility of you interacting. And moreover, if you look at here, I've put some stuff in yellow. So you know how sometimes you have to underline to put the essential passages? I've kind of done that for you. So we're looking at our reading reworked so that I'm only taking the parts that concern me most, trimming the rest, and then I will read it out to you when I've adjusted a few little things as far as formatting. I've even made the font larger so you can see better, for those of you who have a hard time with your eyes. So instead of rereading, what you do is you rewatch the recording and you'll have kind of your live audiobook. If you have a question or something's not clear, you can write in the chat, but really make sure that it's on topic and that really we won't go we'll stray off topic. So that's your responsibility in the chat. If something's not clear, you can ask. I can pause, but we really want to get through this reading today. Is that clear, everyone? Is everyone ready to go? If you're good to go and those instructions are clear, tell me good to go. Yeah, and Jaden, when you rewatch, there's a pause button. So your own pace, you can totally go your own pace. Yeah. So you can whatever. Yeah, you needn't follow the path. Yeah, cool. And that's the beauty of it. And this file, I might stop and rework it if I spot a typo or if things I want to change. Ontology, one of the most central subfields of metaphysics, is the study of what there is. In metaphysics, just as in science, one of the main things we want to find out is what kinds of things there are in the world. Although in the various sciences, discussion is usually confined to a particular domain of reality, biology may be concerned with what kinds of living things there are, physics with the subatomic constituents of matter. In metaphysics, we want to know what kinds of things there are in a sense that is even more general than what science considers. Suppose physics tells us that the basic constituents of matter are leptons and quarks. The metaphysician will then ask, are there only these physical objects, or are there also other types of entities? For example, are there, in addition to these electrons and quarks, also some non-physical entities, like minds? Are there also abstract entities, like numbers or qualities? And in addition to objects, abstract and concrete, are there other categories of entities, events, processes, spatial temporal manifolds? These are ontological questions. questions about what types of entities exist. In the mid-20th century, philosophers like Willard van Orman Quine, inspired by developments in formal logic, initiated a new method for addressing ontological questions. This method, presented in his 1948 paper On What There Is, and notice I'm going to fine-tune some stuff, has since become standard in metaphysics. Let us now learn that method by applying it to the case of non-existent objects. Quine argues that many philosophers before him have been misled in matters of ontology. Metaphysicians of the past have been too quick to believe in all manner of controversial things, from abstract entities like numbers and qualities to even non-existent objects. According to Quine, many of these philosophical errors can be traced to an ignorance of logic. Quine thus begins by criticizing what he takes to be a clearly mistaken ontological view, a view according to which there are non-existent objects. And notice here, there are non-existent objects. This is a good place for us to begin as well, for seeing the errors with this view will lead us to have a better handle on what is a good method for settling what types of things one should believe in. To see why anyone would believe that there are non-existent objects, consider the following sentence. Notice, again, I'm just doing some cosmetic improvements. Pegasus does not exist. Santa Claus does not exist. Both of these sentences are true. It is true that Pegasus does not exist. It's also true that Santa Claus does not exist. But if a sentence is true, then it must at least be meaningful. And if a sentence is meaningful, then each part of the sentence must itself have a meaning. But then it follows from this that the word Pegasus means something. And the phrase Santa Claus means something. What are their meanings? Pegasus and Santa Claus are names. They aren't adjectives or predicate. And so their meaning must involve what they name. So Pegasus names something. Pegasus, without the quotation marks. And Santa Claus names something. Santa Claus. Therefore, there is something that is Pegasus. And there is something that is Santa Claus. So, from the plain fact that the sentences we started with are true, remember, we said it's true. Pegasus doesn't exist. And it's true. Santa Claus doesn't exist. Well, from the plain fact that these sentences are true, these sentences saying that these things do not exist, we're forced into believing that these things are. And so we look to be ontologically committed to them. It seems that just accepting the claim that something does not exist commits us to its being. What are we talking about when we say that Pegasus and Santa Claus do not exist, if not Pegasus and Santa Claus? At first appearance, this is an absurd conclusion. How could what is non-existent in some sense be? Quine considers a couple of things that a philosopher could say here to make the thesis more intelligible. He examines the positions of two philosophers, John McTaggart and Alexius Meinong, about what these non-existent things might be. View number one by McTaggart. Pegasus, Santa Claus, and other non-existent entities are not concrete objects existing somewhere in the world, but ideas in the mind. For example, Pegasus is not a live physical horse with wings, but the idea of a horse with wings. The view number two by Meinong is that Pegasus, Santa Claus, and other non-existent entities are unactualized possibles. They're just like any other entity, except that they lack the properties of actuality and existence. For example, Pegasus is a real physical horse with wings, just not the one that exists in our actual space and time. Although both of these views may appear to be natural ways to think about what we're talking about when we talk about non-existent entities, Quine has objections to both views. First, looking at McTaggart's position, Quine argues that it is unsatisfactory to say that Pegasus and Santa Claus are mere ideas in the mind. This is because the whole issue of non-existent entities was raised by our initially noting that sentences like Pegasus doesn't exist and Santa Claus doesn't exist are true. But of course, the ideas of Pegasus and Santa Claus exist. It's rather Pegasus, the flying horse, and Santa Claus, the jolly man carrying presents, who do not. So the view of McTaggart must be wrong, which is the topic to ideas, but that's not what's at stake. Quine voices several objections to Meinong's view, and these are more subtle. First, let's try to understand better Meinong's view. Meinong is appealing to a distinction between objects that are actual and those that are merely possible. In our everyday life, we're used to thinking that there are very many things that are possible. Phones that take pictures, life on Mars, flying cars, world peace. But only some of what is possible is actual. So if you look here, the realm of possibility is larger than the realm of actuality. Only a small part of what is possible is actual. Now, according to Meinong, when we say that Pegasus and Santa Claus don't exist, we aren't saying that there aren't such entities. Instead, we're only saying that these entities are among the group of merely possible things. Things that are possible, but they're not actual. More like world peace than smartphones. World peace is possible, but unfortunately, it's not the case. Smartphones are possible, and they are the case. And so, you'd place them over here. In so doing, Meinong is understanding existence as a property only of actually existing things. There is a wider class of entities that have being, that are. Those entities that exist, on the other hand, are only those that are actual. We might represent this as follows. So over here you have Santa, you have the Pegasus. They're just possible. It's just that they're not actual. And there's the actual world, which is a subset of everything that's possible. Over here, there's the things in a smaller circle that actually exist. Actual doesn't include ideas, right? Of course it could. Why not? Ideas are perfectly fine. They exist in some sense, right? So let's have some fun. Right now, there's a potential idea, right, that no one's ever had, but I'm about to say it. Imagine a gun made of zucchini. You are having the idea now, actually, of a gun made of zucchini. I took it from the world of the possible, the idea of the gun of a zucchini gun, right? And I made it actual. So it could range over ideas as well. There's no restriction. That's not clear why there would be. Ideas are perfectly fine. No, McX's view isn't, it's McX's view is incorrect because it changes the topic. Remember, so when I'm talking about the idea, can everyone, by the way, let's just check in with everyone. If I say a gun made of zucchini, can everyone have that idea in their head? Type in yes if you just had that idea. I just did. Cool. There you go. A gun made of zucchini that's the size of a galaxy. Did you have that thought? Type in yes if you had that thought. We can have the thoughts. That's cool. There's no reason why we can't say the thoughts exist. That's a true statement. You and I both had those thoughts. The question is, does a giant zucchini gun the size of a galaxy exist? Yes or no? Really, for real. Not the thought. The giant zucchini gun the size of a galaxy. No, there you go. And so McTaggart's view is just switching to a subject that's a little more manageable, which is the ideas of. But those you can have on the cheap because they're just ideas. Yeah, that's it. And I'm scrolling back here. Kai asked, what about entities that are impossible, such as optical illusions like Penrose's chair? And those would be outside that big circle then, Kai. Do you see that? So the circle is still a circle. So the larger circle on the outside is still a circle. You know, it's still, it has an outside, so you place those outside. So impossible objects are not possible. That's what impossible means. So not possible would you'd plant them outside. Is that cool? Yeah, that's what that graph is, an Euler diagram. All right, let's keep reading. Michael. Okay. Quine's first objection to the view that non-existent entities are unactualized possibles involves rejecting the distinction between being on the one hand and existence on the other. What, after all, is the difference between existing and being? It doesn't seem to be any. Anything that is exists. Anything that exists is. Existence isn't a special feature that some objects have that others lack. At least, as Quine points out, this is how we speakers of English have tended to use the word. Conflating existence with actuality, as Meinong does, is to distort the meaning of existence. This simple point, that being and existence are the same, is a point that analytic philosophers since Quine have taken as a postulate. the philosopher Peter van Inwagen has boiled down the contemporary view of existence, deriving from Quine, into 5 theses. The 5th thesis will require more discussion before we can introduce it. But the first 4 theses are: Thesis 1, being is not an activity. Being isn't something that things do, like dancing or taking a nap. 2, being is the same as existence. There's no such thing as something that is but does not exist, or vice versa. Different words for the same thing. Existence is univocal. In other words, the concept of existence has the same meaning, whatever kind of entity it's applied to. And if we can say here, at least one, right? So at least one thought, or at least one zucchini gun. If it exists, there's at least one. Chairs and numbers may be different types of entities, one concrete, one abstract, but they do not participate in different kinds of existence. And this goes to your point, Michael. What it means to say that they exist is the same in both cases. The difference between chairs and numbers is not the way they exist, but rather in their properties, what some may call their natures. Just as when we say this coin is round and this cricket field is round, we're using the word round in the same univocal sense. So when we say this chair exists and this number exists, we're using the word exists in the same univocal sense. And 4, the single sense of being or existence is adequately captured by the existential quantifier of first-order predicate logic. When we say there is a table in this room, or there exists a table in this room, what we're saying may be captured by using the notation of first-order logic, specifically the existential quantifier, as in there exists at least one table that's in this room. There exists at least one. Shows up on the list of things that God put in the world. If you had a list of things that are in the world, an inventory of all the things in the universe, you want to say that it exists, at least one has to show up, and that's captured by the symbol here. Let me pause here. These are 4 theses that metaphysicians start with. Like, that's the starting point. Is everything clear, or do you have a question? Type in clear if that's clear. Question if you have a question. If we're going to get this show on the road, we got to agree on a few things when we move so forward, right? Yeah, we're taking our time, right? Yeah. Existence is univocal. Different things can exist. So Michael says, still unclear about thesis 3. Maybe it'll be cleared. And typically these things do clear up as you go, right? But the existence is univocal doesn't mean there's only one type of thing. It means however many kinds of things there are. Insofar as they exist, it's like an on or off thing. They exist or they don't. Hey, it's part of the list of the things in the universe. That's it. Part of the list of things that we would list as real. That is it. What's in the list? Let's open up a list. Let's imagine I have a long sheet of paper, kind of like Santa's, a naughty list, right? A long, or good boy or good girl, and the whole thing. I have a long, long list, and a list of things in the universe. Well, it's either on that damn list or it isn't. And to be is to be on that list. What's on there? Maybe there's ghosts. Maybe there's souls. Maybe there's angels. Maybe there's gods. Maybe there's Ganesh. Maybe whatever. But to exist just is to show up on that list, which is to say that there is at least one. Does that help a little bit with thesis 3, Michael, that little gloss? Lots of variation in the stuff I listed right now. Right? A doorknob, Ganesh, different things. But it's like, it's on the list. Yeah, it shows up. There's at least one. Yeah, welcome to the club of things that exist. It doesn't make any sort of, the univocality here, right, doesn't sort of put constraints on that the subsequent metaphysical inquiry into what would then count as meriting a claim of existence. That we need to figure that out. That's it. So these are kind of non-committal methodological points. And again, we'll let that fall into place probably, Michael, all right? As we keep going and sort out what does exist. Once we know what existence is, yeah, we want to figure out what does exist, and that's a separate moment. So Quine's first objection to Meinong is that Meinong is distorting the meaning of the word exists. Let's make it even clearer. Quine has another critique of Meinong's view. The moral of this critique can be expressed in the form of the famous Quinean slogan, no entity without identity. To understand what that means, consider 2 examples of what we might think are unactualized possibles. Look at the nearest doorway near you, and imagine that there is a big man in the doorway. There isn't right now, but it could be possible, right? There could be a big man in the doorway, so that's a possible. But there isn't, in fact, a big man in the doorway, so it's an unactualized possible. So turn and look at your doorway. Consider that for a moment. That's an unactualized possible. Could be possible, but it's not actual. Now, imagine there's a bald man in the doorway. Same. This could totally be possible, a bald man in your doorway, but it's not actual. There's no bald man in your doorway right now. Okay, cool. So far, so good. Type in yes if you've done that with your mind. You've considered the door frame. You've looked at it, and you're like, there could totally be, but there isn't right now. There could totally be, but there isn't. So could, but is not. All right, fair. That's an unactualized possible. Now, Quine's going to ask you to keep that thought in mind and ask yourself the following question. Take, for instance, the possible big man in that doorway. And again, the possible bald man in that doorway. Are they the same possible man? Two possible men. How do we decide? How many possible men are in that doorway? Are there more possible thin ones than big ones? How many of them are alike? Or would their being alike make them one? Are no two possible things alike? Or finally, is the concept of identity simply inapplicable to unactualized possibles? What Quine's slogan, no entity without identity, means is that if something exists, that is, if there is in fact such a thing, then there must be objective facts about what it is identical to and facts about what it is not identical to. Consider in any entity that obviously exists, like the US basketball player Kobe Bryant. Because Kobe exists, in other words, there is such a person as Kobe Bryant, there are facts about what and whom Kobe is identical to and what and whom Kobe is not identical to. Kobe Bryant is identical to the MVP or most valuable player for the 2009 and 2010 National Basketball Association Finals. Kobe Bryant is not identical to the current king of Belgium. Belgium, by the way, has no king. If it were vague, or if there were no facts about whom Kobe was identical to, if he could be identical to the current king of Belgium, there's just no fact of the matter, then according to Quine's doctrine, we should be skeptical of the very matter of his existence. Mike, put all that on the shelf. Those thoughts, keep those for yourself. Again, if you've read ahead, which is terrific, again, just so I'm not reading ahead. So just to stay with the flow because everyone's following. But so far, I want to keep this manageable because these are difficult ideas. So far, do we get that? Did everyone grasp this? If that was clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. Like the bald man, the big man, same or different? Well, if they exist, we should have an answer to that, right? Anything that exists, you should have an answer to what it's identical to or what it's not identical to. No entity without identity. Like, say something, say the most far-fetched thing that you think someone might say exists. Maybe you're not claiming it exists, but go ahead. Say something far out in the chat. Have some fun. Some wild thing, far-fetched. Have some fun so we can have some fun. Or a flying pickle. Well, if there is a flying pickle, right? Let's say the flying pickle. Let's go for Jason's flying pickle. If I'm going to say the flying pickle exists, I should be able to ask, is it identical to something that's hovering over Canada? Either it is or it isn't, right? Think about a flying pickle. Think about the idea that it exists. Well, surely if there's a flying pickle, it's either flying over Canada or it isn't. Do we agree, everyone? Type in agree. It's either identical to things over Canada or things or identical to things not over Canada. That's it. And it's like, well, imagine I say, no, look, I believe in the flying pickle. I believe it exists, but I don't believe that there are any robust answers to that question as to whether or not currently it's over Canada or over something other than Canada. That would make no sense. You can't have an entity without identity. No entity without identity. To say that an entity exists is to commit yourself to a web of identity relations or non-identity relations it has with other entities. That is it. So I can ask of the flying pickle. Jaden, that was a great example. I riffed with did everyone, was that clear? Did that make sense? Type in clear if that made sense. Question if you had a question. Thank you, Jaden, for playing along. It's harder for me when I make stuff up and because I'm asking you, right? And then I got to jive with it. I got to play with it. It's like a jazz session, right? It's fun, but it's fun. Like, can't say I believe in the flying pickle, but I don't believe there is a true answer. Even if you don't know what the answer is, there would have to be one. It's either in or it's out of that damn surface. All right, same thing for Kobe Bryant, right? He exists, so clearly there's answers to the identity stuff. This is Quine's critique of the view that non-existent entities like Pegasus are unactualized possibles. Quine argues that we shouldn't believe that there are unactualized possibles because for unactualized possible, like the possible fat man in the doorway, right, there are no determinate precise answers to identity questions. There simply is no fact about whether there are two possible men in the doorway, just one, or 1,000. There's no fact about whether the possible fat man in the doorway is identical to the possible bald man in the doorway, right? Or not. And so we should be skeptical that there are such things in the first place. There you go. This is his critique of this. So this was Quine's critique of the Meinong and McTaggart. McTaggart's fairly straightforward. You move the goalpost, you start to talk about ideas, but of course, ideas exist. But that's a soluble question precisely because it's not the question we're asking. We're asking, are the things that the ideas are about, do those exist? The flying pickle, we all had that idea. We can grant that we had the word, we had the idea, yes, but the flying pickle is what we're interested in metaphysics. For Meinong, it's like, well, no, this whole picture that you paint here, right, that's a misguided picture. Because if you're going to say that the non-existent entities are unactualized possibles, you're basically talking gibberish, right? That whole realm there would make no sense. You got no reason to think that that's how you should unpack the non-existent stuff. That's the demolition job that he does, right? Is that clear, everyone? Type in clear if that's clear. Further question if your question occurred to you. Then we're going to move to the positive side of Quine. He's going to actually replace this with something better, but that's his criticisms. Because we still have the puzzle. Puzzle hasn't left us, by the way. We still have this puzzle. Pegasus doesn't exist. That's true. Santa Claus doesn't exist. That's true. But then we find ourselves caught in admitting they exist because we want to say it's meaningful. So notice I'll say this again. If a sentence is true, then it's meaningful. And if it's meaningful, then the parts of the sentence are meaningful. And that means that the parts Pegasus and Santa Claus are meaningful. And that means their names. And what are they named? They named what they name. So, yeah. And of course, quantifiers can span over ideas, Michael. Michael, can you think about Madonna twice, please? Do that. Think about Madonna. Take a deep breath. Think of something else. And then think about her again. How many thoughts of Madonna did you have? And everybody else, you can play along. So think about Madonna. And then think about her again. How many thoughts of Madonna did you have? Well, 4 by now. That's true. And how many thoughts of Madonna must we have, Kelly, for us to say that that thoughts of Madonna exist? At least one. So we can agree that there exists an X such that this X is a thought of Madonna. Yeah, we can quantify over that. Yeah, perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. You can text your friend and you say, Madonna, man, it's my examples are old because I saw her in the news, but you know, whatever. We were thinking it's a singer. Yeah. World goes by, right? She's still trying to be cool. That's why it's in the news. She's just whatever. So think about, you know, Kim Kardashian. Maybe you think about her already often. I've thought about her again. You can text someone, right? You can say, I was thinking about you again, right? Well, this the 2 tokens of one type, thought, right? I was thinking about you again. That's another token. It's like, how much do you need to exist? Yeah. So the thoughts about you, right? Thoughts about you, right? Thoughts about, about you. Those exist. What is it? What the you part, right? If I'm thinking about, if I say I have a thought of, by the way, I can have a thought of all sorts of things. We had all sorts of thoughts about things that don't exist since we started class. Let's make an inventory of things we talked about that we used words and we had the thoughts. We talked about Santa Claus, Pegasus. What else did we come up with? Big man in the doorway. He wasn't a thing. Like, we have these thoughts. The thoughts are fine. Thoughts, not a problem. That's not a problem. Bigfoot. Yeah, there you go. Shane just planted the idea of Bigfoot in my head. Yeah. Like, if proving the existence of Bigfoot was as easy as having the thought of Bigfoot, you'd have a problem. You'd have a problem. You'd have a serious problem. That's where, if you want to do a tidbit of philosophy of religion for a moment, the ontological proof goes wrong. Like, the thought of God is just the thought of God. That exists. Then it's like, well, it's God I'm wondering about, right? Not just the thought of. Of course, you can have two distinct thoughts about the same thing, but they're two numerically distinct things, two token things. We'll do that in a moment. All right, let's keep moving on. And actually, this is a great segue. Look at Kai's question. One can have two distinctly different thoughts about the same thing. Well, let's go here, my friend. Distinguishing between numerical identity and qualitative identity. Bear in mind that when metaphysicians discuss identity, they have something very particular in mind, what is ordinarily called numerical identity, or identity in the strict sense. When you see someone claiming in metaphysics for some objects A and B that A is identical to B, what is usually being said is that A and B are numerically identical. This means that A and B are the same object. We may have two names here, but there is only one object. This is why the relation is called numerical identity, because it is identity in the numerical sense of being one. In ordinary speech, we sometimes use the word identity, or say some X is identical to some Y, to express that something weaker than strict identity obtains. For example, we may say, these two cars are identical, or these two dresses are identical. In such cases, we're not saying that the dresses or cars are numerically identical. This would be to say that what appears to be two cars is in really just one car, and what appears to be two dresses is really only one dress. Now, this would be interesting, perhaps, but often in ordinary cases, when we say such things, we're not ascribing numerical identity to the dresses and cars, but a weaker relation that philosophers call qualitative identity. Objects A and B are qualitatively identical, just in case they share all of the same qualities, the same color, the same size, the same shape, and so on. Philosophers will often say that qualitative identity is not identity in the strict sense of the term. It's a weaker relation than a genuine identity. Okay? So when Kai was asking, can I have two distinct thoughts about the same thing? For sure you can. Like, I would imagine you can think about me right now, think about me as big and think about me as strong. And those two thoughts were about me, right? They were picking me out as the target, so you had those things. And even if you think about Mark is strong and Mark is strong, right? Those were numerically distinct but qualitatively identical thoughts. And the same applies for objects, not just thoughts, because let's get out of our skulls for a moment, right? If you go to, and you're looking at, let's say, twins, are twins numerically identical or qualitatively identical? Yeah, Kai. Numerical is thisness, qualitativeness is notchness. So what about twins? When you say I got identical twins, what does identical mean? Now that we have the metaphysical jargon for it, when we say I just had identical twins, are we talking about numerical identity or qualitative identity? Identical twins, qualitative identity, exactly. Right? To say that they're numerically identical would mean to say that they're one and the same thing. By the way, like, imagine, for instance, that this would be weird, but you could totally do this. You could fool someone that you're a twin. Let's imagine this. So let's have some fun. Kelly, you're going to play along with me. So Kelly could have some fun. She could convince me she has a twin sister, right? So Kelly shows up to class one time. And let's say when you show up, you dress a certain way. They say, hi, I'm Kelly. And then Kelly has a sister called Shelly. You make this up. This is all a lie. And you could fool me into this. I never see you two in the same room at the same time, right? But you could go around and you could say, I'm Shelly. Do you know my sister Kelly? And you just dress differently. Let's say you tie your hair different or whatever. You have a fake piercing in your nose or something, and then the other one doesn't. And I'm fooled into thinking that there's two people, right? Kelly and Shelly, and they're qualitatively identical because they look alike. They're identical twins. But I could be surprised when I find out that Kelly was pulling my leg, and then I would find out that they are numerically identical, that they're one and the same person. Telling everybody else, you see that? That's what I would find out once I realized there was a prank. I discovered that what was qualitatively identical was also numerically identical. You're one and the same person. Why are you messing with my mind? And this would make a great rom-com or something, by the way. I just imagine this would be a great, I'm sure someone made a movie or novel about this. That'd be a great premise for something. And you can have the reverse. If you watch The Prestige, it's the reverse, right? Yeah. All right, so let me pause here. Is this clear, this distinction between numerical? It's not super difficult, but it's language that we're going to introduce that we're going to use. If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. Numerical identity, right? That's the token thisness. Qualitative identity, that's the suchness, right? You can have suchness you can find that in multiple token things. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it's an important distinction for us to have. Michael asks, is what we were talking about when you were saying existence isn't repeatable? Yeah, kind of like Michael, you're numerically unique. So, I mean, you just fully are, right? An individual thing in the universe is numerically unique. By everything that's a particular is numerically unique. It doesn't necessarily, maybe it's qualitatively identical to other things, but existence has some sort of numerical claim to distinctness, right? We'll have jargon for that. It's immanent. There's terminology in metaphysics for us to make sense of that. But yeah, Jaden asks, and I want to hear from everyone, by the way. I'm hearing from mainly the same folks, which is cool up to a point, but I want to make this course about everyone. So I want to hear from everyone. If you do have concerns or questions that are philosophical, that's cool. That's what we're doing. Although we want to stay on track, but let's just see. Jaden says, this may be straying from the path a little bit, but if nobody knows two things are qualitatively identical, everyone thinks that they're numerically identical. Does that make those two things the same thing? Well, there's the question of knowing and there's the question of being. And knowing doesn't affect being. Whether or not someone knows something is not going to change what is. You see that, Jaden? So the first part of what your question, it's irrelevant. So what's the state of human knowledge at a given time? Well, who knows? That changes. Who knows? What's the list of things on like God's list of inventory of things that exist? I don't know. Those are separate questions, right? So for instance, my being duped into thinking, right, that Shelley and Kelly were numerically distinct did not make them thereby numerically distinct. And even if Kelly went around faking it and convincing the whole planet that there are in fact two, there'd still only be one. The knowledge stuff doesn't tell you one bit about what actually exists, which is why we have this possibility of an experience called surprise. What surprise is when reality slaps us across the face and teaches us that our conceptions were erroneous, our representations were not the case. So yeah, so there's be all sorts of fun, interesting things about what we think is numerically or qualitatively identical and what is in fact numerically and qualitatively identical, and how the matches or mismatch can make for great storytelling. But the knowledge of stuff doesn't tell us much about what actually is the case. You got that, Jaden? Does that make sense, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask a question. Yeah. Just like we're not doing psychology, we're not doing epistemology. Like knowledge is great. We're trying to get to know the world. And to know the world, we have to have a world that's there to be known. It's like, what's the truth? Well, it's whatever's out there waiting to be known. Shane says, the twin discussion reminded me of a show I saw on YouTube called Strange Addictions, and the episode involved these two identical twins who look exactly alike and do everything as well. Apparently, they cannot live without each other. Yeah, so you can have fun with twins, right? And if anyone's seen The Prestige, it's a Christopher Nolan movie. If you have, type in yes. No, you have type in no. I don't want to spoil it. So you know what I'm talking about and why I'm bringing it up if you've seen it. If you know, you know. Yeah, have a look. So The Prestige. So have a look at that. So with, what's the guy who played Batman in the Christopher Nolan movies? What's his face there? Really good actor. Christian Bale, that's it. All right, cool. All right, so let's go on track here. Let's and we're doing great, by the way. And let's check the fun factor. How's the fun factor? Still having fun? Type in fun if you're having fun. That's to be mind-numbing because it's hard, but at the same fun, stimulating at the same time, right? I'm having fun. I typed in fun. We're having fun. Good. We're having fun. And it feels, does this feel like a 2000 level university course too? Type in yes if it does. I want it to be hard. Like it has to feel like we're not just having fun. We want to have fun, but not just fun. I'm aiming for this to be a serious course. Type in yes if it feels like a serious course. Like that's the blend I want. Like serious, but like at the same time, because it's fascinating and because we have the freedom to talk about this stuff, we can take pauses and you're with a philosopher now. Yeah, fun and perplexing, right? It's fun. And you're with a, when's the last time you spoke to a professional metaphysician? Like you have access to one right now. So like when you ask me this kind of stuff, we'll go places with it. We'll have some fun. All right, let's find a method here for finding one's ontological commitments. So remember, Quine rejects the view that there are non-existent entities, which remember, if you just look at this locution, that's a very confused locution. There is things that don't, there is. It's like on the face of it, just contradictory. Nonetheless, he wants to accept that both of these senses are true, and that's what landed us into trouble. Pegasus doesn't exist. Like, yeah, Pegasus doesn't exist. And Santa Claus doesn't exist. That's right. So he's going to have to do something. So according to Quine, just because these senses are true, just because they mean something, even though the words Pegasus and Santa Claus themselves are meaningful, this does not commit us to believing in such things as Santa Claus and Pegasus. Pegasus and Santa Claus do not exist. And what is just to say the same thing another way, they lack being. There must be some way in which Pegasus and Santa Claus are meaningful, even if they do not name anything. Quine's view is that once we represent the sentences in the language of first-order predicate logic, it will become clear what the real ontological commitments of these claims are. This is where all the logic stuff comes in. Yay! Quine calls this procedure the process of regimentation. We want to regiment the statements we take to be true in a language in which their entailments are clear. Entailments are what it is that they logically have as consequences. When we do this using P, lowercase p, as a name to stand for Pegasus and S to stand in for Santa Claus, we see the structures of these sentences as follows, right? It is not the case that there exists an X, a thing, such that this thing is identical to Pegasus. And it's not the case that there exists a thing such that this thing is identical to S. Now notice we're still using P and S, so we're going to have to find a way to get rid of them. We want to say it's not the case that there is such a thing. It's not the case that there is such a thing. And now we got to try to find a way of getting rid of P, because otherwise I land myself the same problem. I named it. What the hell am I naming? I'm naming it. It must be real, right? Same thing here. So let's find a way to get rid of S, and let's find a way to get rid of P while saying doesn't exist. And we're going to use some logic for that. So far, so clear. We're about to do that. We haven't done it yet. If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. We want to deny the existence of these things. We want to say that it's true that they don't exist. All right, so let's go for it. These sentences are meaningful, but we can now clearly see that given their structure, they do not entail the existence or being of anything, let alone Pegasus or Santa Claus. Indeed, the presence of the negation sign in the front shows that they explicitly deny the existence of Pegasus and Santa Claus. But now, what about the words Pegasus and Santa Claus themselves and the symbols P and S that we've used in our regimentations? Must they not mean something in order for the whole sentences to be meaningful? Yes, however, one thing Quine emphasizes on What There Is, the essay in which he publishes stuff, is that we mustn't confuse the demand that words like Pegasus must mean something with the demand that they name something. Quine proposes the view, following the logician and philosopher Bertrand Russell, and Michael, remember, just so that we don't chop on the bandwidth, if you are typing something that's a little more involved, do so in a separate file, and then you can paste it in and press a little chevron when appropriate. That way, just in case, right? So Quine proposes the view following the logician and philosopher Bertrand Russell that names are actually disguised descriptions. And so we find the meaning of a name by finding a description that is the description that it's disguising. For example, Quine considers the view that Pegasus means the same as the winged horse that was captured by Bellerophon. So if you know Greek mythology, right, Pegasus is the winged horse that was captured by Bellerophon. Then the meaning of Pegasus does not exist could be expressed as follows. It's not the case that there exists a thing such that this thing is the winged horse that was captured by Bellerophon. Notice here, does the word Pegasus show up? Yes or no? It doesn't show up, right? Or using symbols standing for the predicates is winged, because lots of things can be winged, have wings. Lots of things can be horses, is a horse. And lots of things can be captured by Bellerophon. You may have captured other things, right? Then what we get is this. It is not the case that, and then we're going to negate everything that comes after it in this bracket, this outermost bracket. So it's not the case that there exists an x such that this x is winged and is a horse and was captured by Bellerophon. And notice here, remember the parentheses, we just have to pair these up pairwise because and is just a two-place relation, but the placement of these particular parentheses could be up for grabs. And moreover, for anything else, so you go the whole world, and if you find anything other than that X you grabbed, right? If that thing is winged and it's a horse and it's been captured by Bellerophon, then it's identical to the X. So that's a way of saying that there's going to be only one and there is no such thing. So this kind of lets you now grab anything else and make sure that whatever else you're grabbing, if it does meet that description, it's that singular individual, and you're saying there is no such individual. This sentence is perfectly meaningful, yet it does not entail the existence of a winged horse. Instead, it explicitly denies that there is such a thing. So you've all gone to the grocery, and you've all let's say bought something with a barcode. And when you buy something with a barcode, like it's lines like this, right? And some of these lines are fatter. I don't know. Maybe I can give myself some fatter lines here. A little. Oh no, that's a dotted line. I don't want a dotted line. Hold on. Medium. There you go. This, and I don't want a dotted line. I want this large. Ah, there you go. That's not that large. That's not. I can have a fatter pencil than this. Small. Right? You have a bunch of lines like this. Right? Now zoom in and imagine one individual line. Let's consider one individual line. Let's say it's a mixture of, like when you're doing bars, let's agree, I don't know how barcodes work exactly, but it seems pretty sensible to say that there are thin, medium, and thick lines. Can we agree? Thin, medium, and thick? Type in yes if that's fine with you. That's the only vocabulary of barcodes. Thin, medium, yeah. And look, you know, the items, like the items in the grocery. So here's a banana, right? And here's an orange, right? It has a barcode. The banana will have a barcode. Let me make some thick lines here, right? There's some medium lines. And this one will also have a barcode, right? This one will also have a barcode. It is true, right, of each one of these things that, let's say, I could say of the banana, the bananas have thin lines, and have medium lines and have fat lines. And likewise, it is true, this one has thin lines, medium lines, and fat lines. But notice how between each of these, so to speak, is an and between all of these. Because you're asked when you scan them, you don't just scan one line. That wouldn't tell you much. The whole conjunction itself picks out a unique object, namely this. And likewise, and this line, and that line, and this medium one, and this fat one, and another fat one, and a medium one, and then you have all your lines over here. That picks out uniquely this object. In fact, that's the whole point, is that they pick out individual things in the grocery with a very nice economy of the vocabulary, but the individual lines themselves are repeatable, yet I could have a barcode that's absolutely unique to pick out one thing. Now ask yourself, did I use the word banana here, yes or no, in what I just circled? The word banana show up? The word banana. Am I naming banana? In what I've circled here, if you look at the lines closely, do you see the word banana? Zoom in. No. Okay, cool. Zoom in on your barcode. Anybody see the word banana? No names, right? No names. Yet, without using a name, have I picked out a particular uniquely? Yes or no? Yeah. I've managed to do all of the work that the name typically does without using the name. All right. We're going to have some fun. I need a volunteer. Type in me if you want to be the volunteer. You're going to be my guinea pig. We're going to have some fun. All right, Nigel. There you go. Nigel, let's go for Nigel. Nigel, I'm sorry. This is you. Right? We're all fine with that. Stick figure. That's you, Nigel. And Nigel has a name, right? Right, Nigel. All of this ranges over any imaginable language you could. It's not philosophy of language or linguistics. So yeah, it's completely, language has nothing to do with what we're doing in a certain sense, right? So this is Nigel's name. And Nigel, you know, there's other people called Nigel, but we can say, like, let's say, you know, when you're opening an email account, Nigel, you're probably not the first person to be called Nigel. So chances are when you open your Gmail account, right, you couldn't just go nigel@gmail.com. Am I right? If you tried that, you'd probably say name was already used. Do you agree? Nigel@gmail.com. Yeah, I wish, right? So what do we do? What do we do when we want to figure that out, right? You typically put like your birth date after or something, some random number, right? So you say Nigel 2, Nigel 3, and maybe you're Nigel number 190, you know, 97. So Nigel 197, that's going to pick you uniquely, right? But we understand that even though we don't mention this, right? And of course, other people are called Nigel. We use the name to pick out Nigel and only Nigel, not all of the other Nigels, but specifically Nigel Tong. Even if, you know, other people have your last name too as well, Nigel Tong. But another person who's called Nigel Tong, do they have your parents, Nigel? Yes or no? Well, now what we want to do is we want to pick out Nigel uniquely without naming him. Because if we can devise tools, a pair of pincers, so to speak, that allows us, or tongs, to pick up Nigel as an individual in the world uniquely without naming him, then we'll have a means for talking about non-existent objects without naming them and landing into the conundrum that we were landing in earlier. So let's have some fun and let's string together a barcode for Nigel. We're going to have some fun, Nigel, and we're going to say, what's the name of your parents? Just let me give myself a space to type here. Dot is the child of, what's your mom's name? First name? Sophie and Donald. Sophie, right? And then we want to say, and, let me put my and chevron here, is the son of is the son of Donald. And then we can check against the solution sheets to figure out whether or not we picked out Nigel. So is named Nigel. We'll start with that one. So let's put this at the top, right? Is named Nigel Tong. And of course, there could be others. I'm sure if you look in the, you know, online, there's other people by your name on LinkedIn or whatever. But how many people are named Nigel Tong, are the child of Sophie? And I'm going to put an and here as well, right? We have an and, right? And is the child of Sophie and is the son of Donald. Suppose that we're not picking you out uniquely. There's still another person. Damn it. There's another Nigel Tong in the world that is named Nigel Tong and is the child of Sophie and is the son of Donald, right? And let's say, well, actually, I don't want to name. Let's just rule that out because we got landed into problems. Let's just go for Sophie as the son of Donald. What's unique about you, Nigel, that you don't think a lot of people can do other than you? Like a lot of people can claim this truthfully about themselves. It's a repeatable, but you've got some sort of claim to having it. Can you like play a special instrument? Have you won a special distinction? Something that would be, and help you invent stuff, people. Let's have some fun. Nigel's my guinea pig. But like, what could be something that's unique that let's narrow down the field enough, right? Plays 12 different musical instruments. Beautiful, right? Plays 12 different musical, and if that's true, then I need to see the YouTube video. All right, plays 12 different musical instruments. Let's say this is true. All right. Now let's say you're the child of Sophie. Check. You're the son of Donald. Check. You play 12 different musical instruments. Check. And let's say if we say and we combine all of these predicates, what we pick out is you and you uniquely. In this list of attributes, did we use the word Nigel Tong? We say is name, but then we'll mention it. But did we use the word Nigel? I remove this one here. Did we use the word Nigel? No. So what you do is you string along as many bars on the barcode to pick the thing in the, you know, on its own. So we could say then instead of something like there is an X, because Nigel, you exist. Let's just check in with Nigel. Nigel, do you exist? Yes or no? Just checking in. Certify your own existence. Thank you. There is an X such that this X, right, is the child of Sophie and is the child of Donald. Because if you have siblings, notice that not just Sophie the name, but Sophie the actual persons, there could be multiple things that are the child of Sophie, right? I have multiple children, so there's multiple children that are the son of Mark, right? Thor is the son of Odin. Odin's got lots of kids, right? And plays 12 different musical instruments. Notice here how, if we've done our job right, and we've strung together a barcode, so to speak, right? And that barcode uniquely picks out Nigel, we can pick him out with perfectly repeatable predicates, but strung together in a combination that's not repeatable. So they're repeatable lines, but their combination is unique. Well, we have repeatable predicates, but their combination is unique. And then we can say either exists or not exists. In this case, we want to say that Nigel exists, but I can pick him out without doing that. And then I can do the same thing with good old-fashioned Pegasus, right? What we're doing with Pegasus is the same damn thing. And let me go back, and then hopefully this will snap into place. Let's go back to our Pegasus. There's not the case that there exists an X, a thing, such that this thing is winged, is a horse, and was captured by Bellerophon. Forget this for the moment. Can everyone see that? The barcode explanation, is that helpful? If that's helpful, type in yes. If you got a question, ask your question. Let's make a barcode instead of naming the damn thing. Pick you out uniquely. Devin, that helped? No one else? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. I'm working overtime to make this clear. I'm doing detours. I want to pedagogically sort of make this cool. All right. Because remember, you're my only lifeline to what's going on. If you're lost, right? And look here, right? And before we go on, remember the idea, we don't want to use a name. So here you can find yourself negating the existence of a thing that matches all of the descriptions of the thing without using the name. It's perfectly meaningful, yet it explicitly denies that there is such a thing. It's a pretty cool trick. And notice why all the logic was there for us to be able to do that. We'll keep using some logic, but this is an instance where if we would have stuck to normal intuitions and language, we would have get caught in this trap because we'd be using names to name things. And then we'd be like, what in the world are we naming, right? Steve Rogers and Captain America, must these things exist? It's like, we do know what we're talking about. It's like, no, we can sort of say, for instance, that there is no such thing as Captain America. And the way we could say there's no such thing as Captain America is we say it's not the case that there exists an X such that this X is part of the Avengers, part of the Avengers and wields a shield. And I'm going to just not use parentheses here to make my life simple. And I don't know what else about Captain America, and is a super soldier. I don't know, soldier, super, it's an S that we're using again. How could we? Powerful, ultra powerful, super powerful, and so on, right? You keep stringing those on as long as you need to, and there's no limit to how long the conjunction would be, right? And this is the sense in which you're unique. You're not unique in the sense that you can claim to have a predicate that you monopolize. You got cool hair? Sorry, other people can have cool hair. You bench press 300 pounds? Sorry, other people can bench press 300 pounds. You own a Cybertruck? Sorry, other people can own a Cybertruck. You have a dad named Paul? Sorry, other people can have a dad named Paul. You have a gold tooth? Sorry, other people can have a gold tooth. You know, all of these things. You want a gold medal at the Olympics? Sorry, other people can have a gold medal at the Olympics, right? All of these things are potentially repeatable, right? But the combination, though, is unique to you. And that's in the sense in which I can pick out individuals if I can barcode you and get it. Again, another gloss on it, having fun with Captain America and gold teeth. But is that helpful, everyone? Type in extra clear if that's extra clear. Then we'll move on. Question if you got a question. And again, if you're lost, you're lost. That's your question. Like, this is what the course content is, right? And it's a really cool thing after that, because then we don't have to believe in Santa Claus, but we can still talk about Santa Claus. Because, you know, as a dad, I want to be able to talk about Santa Claus, but I also don't want to believe in him. All right, so Quiet's positive views about ontological commitment then is the following. We're only committed to the existence of something when we accept a sentence that quantifies over it. So you're only committed to the existence of an X when you accept something that says there exists at least one of it, and you accept that sentence as true. So to be precise, we should accept the existence of all and only those entities needed to stand in as values of bound variables to make these existentially quantified sentences as true. Let's consider an example. Say you take the following sentence to be true, perhaps because you take it to be part of your best theory of the world. Electrons exist. True. To see whether this sentence commits you to the existence of anything, according to Quine, we need to regiment it. Symbolize it in the language of first-order predicate logic. In this case, of course, it is trivial to accomplish this translation. For more complex sentences or those that don't reveal their quantificational structure so clearly as this one, this step will involve more work, but let's just start with a simple case. You saw the homework, things get complicated. Let's start with something easy. When we regiment this sentence using the language of first-order logic, we see it says this. There is an X, there's at least one, such that this X is an electron. Or using the predicate EX to stand for is an electron, we can say there is an X such that this X is an E, an electron. Now, what does Quine's theory of ontological commitment say? Let's see what Quine says in his own words. To be assumed as an entity is purely and simply to be counted as the value of a variable. Like what would satisfy this X? The thing in the world that you could plug in successfully and it would fit this description, that's what you take to be true. So to be assumed as an entity is purely and simply to be counted as the value of a variable. The value of the variable is a thing you plug in that X. The variables of quantification, something, nothing, everything, range over our whole ontology, whatever it may be. And we're convinced of a particular ontological presupposition if and only if the alleged thing presupposed has to be counted among the things over which our variables range in order to render one of our affirmations true. So to tell whether something, an electron, proton, Pegasus, Santa Claus, and so on, should be assumed as an entity, we must first translate the sentences we take to be true into quantificational language, into the language of first-order predicate logic. Then we can see what these sentences quantify over. We're talking about this X. Well, if the sentence is true, then whatever would satisfy that X, that's what you think exists. So returning to the last case, in order for there is an X such that this X is an electron to be true, there must be something, how many? At least one that exists and that can stand in as the value of the bound variable X. Something that could actually, you could put forward and say, you see, this fits the bill. This fits the description you've just given me. This means that there must be some entity that satisfies the description is an electron. Thus, we can see clearly that this sentence commits us to the existence of at least one electron. And, just like Bigfoot, once you got one, you're good to go. It's on the inventory of things that exist. Let's apply Quine's method to a slightly more complicated sentence. Some electrons are bonded to protons. Say this is a sentence you accept. Symbolizing this sentence in first-order predicate logic, we get, there exists a thing, and there exists at least another thing, such that the first thing is an electron, and the second thing is a proton, and the first thing is bonded to the second thing, where Py stands for is a proton, and Bxy stands for is bonded to, right? So this is a two-place relation here. So you say is bonded to, and X is bonded to Y. Well, what do you mean by X? X is an electron, and Y is a proton. And there exists at least one of these things that satisfies this, and at least one of these things that asks this. There's at least two different things. This one thing and this other thing. One of the things is an electron, the other is a proton, and moreover, they're bonded, right? Because that needs to be there as well. It wouldn't be enough that electrons exist. It wouldn't be enough that protons exist. This sentence is saying that moreover, they're bonded. So I have to now subscribe to the truth of this relation where X is bonded to, right? This is what this says. I thought, empty space, right, is bonded to empty space. It's a two-place relation, kind of like is married to or punches and so on. Again, to apply Quine's method for determining our ontological commitments, we need to see what needs to exist in order for this sentence to be true. Hence, there must be something to stand in as the value of the bound variable X and something to stand in as the bound variable Y. This means that there must exist some X that is an electron and some Y that is a proton, and the X must be bonded to the Y. So this sentence ontologically commits us, according to Quine, to at least one electron that is bound to at least one proton. It's common to express Quine's method for determining one's ontological commitments as a slogan. To be is to be the value of a bound variable. The slogan succinctly expresses Quine's view that to determine one's ontological commitments, one should express the statements one takes to be true in first-order logic, and then one's ontological commitments can be read off as those entities needed to stand in as values of the bound variables in order. I can skip all this. It's redundant. We can summarize this method in 3 steps. This is the beauty of my having kind of control over the file. Right? I can go ahead and I can improve it when I see there's some redundancy. So there's 3 steps here. Step 1, and we're going to end on this. Decide which sentences you take to be true. You got to start with somewhere. Where's the place to start? Why don't we start with the truth, right? So say, hey, these sentences are true. Get those all together, write them on a long piece of paper. Step 2, regiment the sentences by symbolizing them in the language of first-order predicate logic. Kick in your homework skills. Now make it clear what exactly that they're saying. And step 3, since these were all sentences that you took to be true, commit yourself to all and only those entities out in the world needed to stand in as the values of bound variables, the X's and the Y's, well, you could plug in there in order to make the sentences as true. And that's your ontology. That's the world you think exists out there. You take everything you take to be true, you say it in logic, and then your world that you think is the reality out there precisely is all of the entities that would need to exist in order to be plugged in there as the X's and the Y's for the things to come out as true. Step 1, step 2, step 3. We'll learn a step 4 next week. This is the reading that I wanted us to have some fun with. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you have a question, ask your question. This is Quine's method. Quine's method. That's why we're learning all this logic stuff. Quine's method. Start with the sentence that you believe are true. Just let's have some fun for just a second. Let's write down some sentences that we think are true on the board here. I'm going to have some fun because we need step 1, right? So we said a moment ago that we also took Santa Claus doesn't exist, right? Santa Claus does not exist. We take this to be true. Let's just say another one that we take to be true. What else you take to be true? Something non-controversial, right? Mustard is often put on hot dogs. Mustard is often put on hot dogs. Is often put on hot dogs, which is like, that's true. Mustard is often put on hot dogs. Pineapples belong on pizza. Yeah, if you take that to be true, let's go for it as well. And we could have some other fun, good. So pineapples belong on pizza. What else could we say? True sentences. Let's just, a bunch of things like, I have a mom. I have a mom. There we go. My chair is hard. There you go. There is a chair that's hard. There is at least one chair. I'm writing this in the chat, so it's easier. There's at least one chair that is hard. These are all things that we want to say are true. You start there, right? And then what you do is you regiment all of that, and that starts to paint a universe for you. It starts to paint an inventory of things that have to be true. They have to exist in order for this. True belongs to epistemology. That have to exist in metaphysics for all of these claims to be true. So there you go. Let me just look at what we were trying to do. This was what we wanted to accomplish with Ontology Part 2. Can everyone see the work that logic is doing for us? Type in yes if you can start to see that why the homework is starting to make more sense. We're not done using it. We'll use it throughout the whole semester. Because I asked you to go on a bit of a journey with me this week. I had you do a ton of homework. You're going to have more homework to do. Let's look at the homework number 2. We want to start from questions, what did I say? 93, am I right? Second half for this week. What did I say? Yes, 93. All right. Let's look at what we're looking at right now. Using the underlined letters, symbolize the following propositions which require multiple place relations but no quantifiers. Why no quantifiers? Because we're all going to involve things that we know, particulars we care which. So here you go. Mark loves Joseph Arthur. That's my son. Mark, a particular we care which, so we're going to name it M. Joseph Arthur, a particular we care which, so we'll name it J. And then loves, you can understand as a two-place relation, right? So loves will look like this, dot, 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 loves, dot, dot, dot. And notice that this is the correct symbolization for it. What would this mean here? What I'm putting in, what I'm selecting. What would this mean? Given what we've agreed on right now that's on the screen, what would capital L, lowercase j, and lowercase m mean? Yeah, which is, I'm happy to report, also a true statement, right? But love is not a symmetrical relation, by the way. You can say things like is next to, right? Is next to is a symmetrical two-place relation. You can't be, can we agree? If something really truly is next to something else, there's at least two things in the universe. Can we agree on that? Type in agree if you agree. If truthfully you can say such and such is next to such and such a thing, there's at least two things in the universe. Like it can't be true of you that you're next to something else if you're alone in here. There's at least two things. Cool. So we agree on that. What about is next to, right? And that's why Michael says, I'm besides myself without, but that's why we call that metaphorical use, right? When I'm using is next to, I mean it literally. What is it? Is this a symmetrical or asymmetrical relationship? If something is next to something else, is that something else also next to the something? Yes or no? I'll say that again slowly. If something is next to something else, is the something else also next to the something? I mean, that sounds like a little brain puzzle at first, but yes, huh? Clearly. What about love? If something loves something else, does the something else love the something? If A loves B, does B necessarily love A? No, that's the part that sucks, right? At one point we realize, oh no, love is an asymmetrical relationship, right? So you want to be mindful when you do these exercises, which place you put what. Like in the case of love, right? This would be, it's not like this is, the problem with if you say the following, this would be incorrect, by the way. It would not be incorrect because it's not possible. It's incorrect because it's tracking a different sentence. And that is not what this one's saying. There's a direction of fit here. This is saying Mark loves Joseph Arthur. It is not saying Joseph Arthur loves Mark. So even though love is a symmetrical relation, please be careful when you practice this stuff. Do not confuse that symmetrical means you can put it in whichever order you want, because we do need to pick one side of how we're going to go with this relation. And so do map that as accurately as possible. And in some cases, if it's an asymmetrical relationship, then clearly you're barred from going the opposite direction, right? Because unfortunately, if you're in love with Kim Kardashian, she doesn't love you back, man. And if you know her, she doesn't know you back. It doesn't work that way, right? So there's a bunch of relationships out in the world. Some of these relationships are two-place relations. So notice here, caused, right? So World War I caused the Great Depression. This should be here. I messed around with my spacing here, so we should be able to see it, right? But World War I caused the Great Depression. It's not the Great Depression that caused it's not the Great Depression that caused World War I. It's World War I that caused the Great Depression. That's what's being said. Could you say the opposite? You could. Would it be historically accurate? No. Can you still care as a metaphysician? No. We could totally have fun, and I could have given you as an example. Let's imagine 94A. I could have said, right, the Great Depression caused, and we understand here caused to be a two-place relation, World War I. If we did this and we agreed that W is going to stand for the particular we care which is this event called World War I, and we say that D stands for the particular we care which, what would I put here in my answers? So what would I put on the right here? Take the time to think about it. Caused. So remember, this is where it might help for you to write this out, right? Caused this caused that. So what caused what if we're modeling this sentence here? What goes here? D or W? Lowercase d or lowercase w? Say D cause, and that's lowercase w, please. No automatic formatting, right? W. And the notation is that we're going to put cause on the outside. So actually what it looks like is this, this, this. And that is something we looked at a moment ago when we saw B is bonded to with the electrons and protons and whatnot. Right? And notice I start you off gradually. So here's the thing. When you look at these examples, they're all examples that use two-place relations or multiple place relations, but that involve particulars we care which. So you don't have to worry about quantifiers just yet, right? So they're always going to be relating to specific individuals we care which. So just to get you started. Then we move up a notch. Now we're going to have particulars we care not which. So we're going to have to say whether there's at least one or all of them or whatever, and you're going to have some fun with those. So you work on that. Then you check the solutions. Do not, and I repeat, this is super important. Right? Let me just kind of zoom out so no one sees this. I can speak. Do not just stare at the solutions, reading one side and the other. If you do that, you will fail in the quiz. I repeat, you have to do the homework. And I mean do in the sense of to do, for real. If you just look, because right now there's a sense in which you could just look at the screen and it makes sense, right? So imagine I look at this. I love some person. A particular I care which, some person, it's, we don't know who. So I go, there exists at least one thing such that this thing is a person and I love it. That's intuitive. Move on. No, you're not practicing your brain power. You're practicing my brain power. My brain muscle is getting a workout, not yours. So you have to make sure that you don't do these answers on your own first. You don't look at the solutions, and you do them on your own first. That forces you to ask the tough questions. Particular or repeatable? It's an unrepeatable thing. A particular we care which? Well, yeah, it's we care which. It's not you, it's I. And what about some person? Well, being a person, multiple things can be people. That's repeatable. So being a person is going to be a predicate, and so on and so forth. How many? Some, at least one, and then you're going to find out that you're using this quantifier. You have to do all of that on your own. This is the advice I want to give everyone. Do it on your own. Do not just stare at the solution sheets. Are we agreed on that? Type in agree if you agree. Question if you got a question. I want to warn you because it would suck. You'll fail disastrously for the test, the quiz, and then the next quiz, and you'll be so lost. You think you got it, but you won't. They'll give you a false sense of thinking that you got it. So let me scroll around and see the different sections here. At one point, because so far all we have are, I really don't like monkeys, all this kind of stuff, right? These are standalone sentences. In part 6, we're going to have arguments. So symbolize the following arguments. And I give you a scheme of abbreviation here. So the predicate is a skeptic, is an atheist, hates God, whatever, right? And then I give you an argument. And the argument is going to have premises and a conclusion. Conclusions are always coming after things like therefore, right? I kind of pre-chewed it for you, so it's not too complicated. I always end with therefore and put the conclusion. And just as a convention, we'll separate the premises with a single slash and the conclusion with a double slash. So if you look here, right, this is not new notation or it's just minor notation. This just means that we're separating. This is one premise, this is another premise, and this is a conclusion. And the conclusion is separated from the premises by having a double slash, right? Therefore, this is what you would read that as therefore, and then you have to track the whole argument. So no one who is a skeptic or an atheist hates God. After all, how can one possibly hate something that one thinks is inexistent? Now, atheists will not go to heaven if they are skeptics and hate God. Therefore, everyone will go to heaven. And you're not asked to evaluate the argument, but just to symbolize it, right? And then we could logically have fun. If this was a logic class, we could say whether or not the conclusion is validly entailed by the premises. That is, were the premises all true? Would the conclusion have to be true? But that would be for another course. All we want to do is make explicit the ontological commitments, right? Now that we know how the method works. Let's make something up. There exists, how about this? What did we say? What's the pickle thing earlier? We had a pickle. Flying pickle? The flying pickle? A pickle is flying over Canada. A pickle is flying over Canada. Let's assume this is a true sentence. It's not. It's a false sentence. But let's assume it is a true sentence. How would we symbolize this? Guide me through the process. What am I going to need? What are the basic ingredients? I'm going to need something for is a pickle. Do we agree? I'm going to need something for is a pickle. Agreed? Type in yes if you agree, because lots of things can be pickles. We're gonna is a pickle. So we're gonna put that. What, lowercase or uppercase p? Lowercase or uppercase? Yeah, capital P, right? Because that's a repeatable stuff. Right? Is a pickle. Things flying over Canada. Do we agree that lots of things can be flying over Canada? Repeatable? Flies over. Actually, you know what? Let's make it more fun. Let's make this a two-place relation that's called flies over. What about Canada? How do we symbolize Canada? Lowercase c. You got it. Lowercase. And it matters that it's lowercase, right? Because it's a particular we care which, right? It's naming something a particular we care which. Now, if we say that capital P means is a pickle, if we say that F is flies over, and if we say that Canada is lowercase c, take a moment on your own and figure this out. There exists an X, at least one thing, such that this thing is a pickle. Could I stop here? No, I can't just stop here. It's not just a pickle. What's special about that pickle? It's flying over something. And this X is flying over something. What is it flying over? Flying over C. Right? And I don't know why it just changed my font on me. Let me see if I can put that better. Here we go. Right. There exists at least one thing such that this thing is a pickle, and not just that, but it is flying. The same thing I'm talking about that is a pickle because it's still in the same bracket. That X, not just any X now. We've said it. The thing that's a pickle is at least one. It's flying. It's flying over what? Flying over Canada. There you go. Let me just have some fun and see what bad mistakes to make them productive. I'm going to grab a mistake, and it doesn't matter who made it, and I'm going to put it in here. I want to see why it was a mistake. Suppose I did this. What would be the problem? I'm going to put it in red because it's a mistake. What would be the problem with the thing in red? Yeah, it's a two-place relation, right? Flies over what? Flies over what? You need to fly over. You got two spaces here you need to fill out, right? So you want to fill out. Yeah, you needed a Canada, Mandeep. Yeah, cool. Cool. Do we quantify over Canada? Do we need a quantifier for Canada? Is there do we need to say Canada exists, right? Do we need to say this? Yes or no? No, please don't do that. We don't need to do that. We don't quantify over names, right? Because we know that if we name something, right, it exists. And in case it doesn't, we've learned today how to get rid of it, exercise away the name, but it's perfectly legitimate to call things name when they exist. Voila. Can everyone see why this is the right answer? Type in yes if you can see that. Question if you got a question. All right. Is anyone scared? Type in yes if you're scared. It takes a lot of guts to even say that. Anxious? That's perfectly legit. That's perfectly legit. Right? Little bit. How do we not get scared? Is it about increasing your IQ? You can't increase your IQ. This is not an IQ test. How do we get not scared in this course? Jade, you got it, Jade. Practice. Practice. That's it. That's it. The more you do it, the easier it's going to be. It's really not that difficult. It's really not that difficult. Let's have some more fun now. A pickle is flying over a bun. What am I going to need here? I need some more stuff. What do I need? A pickle is flying over a bun. Got my P, I got my F. I need a B. Capital B for ... is a bun. Lots of things can be buns. All right, try again. 2 minutes, and we'll wrap on that. Write it in the chat. Don't press enter until I say so. We'll end on this. Confidence booster before I send you on. Oh, I'm glad we're doing this. Okay, cool. All right. The thing that's going to be a pickle. There exists a thing, right? There's at least one thing such that this thing is a pickle. Is the thing that's a pickle the thing that's a bun? Can a pickle be a bun? Yes or no? So how many things am I going to need if I have a pickle flying over a bun? How many things in the universe have to be there? At least two, right? At least two. Two same or different things? If I'm going to have a pickle flying over a bun, my universe has at least to have two things and two different things. Agreed? There you go. And there is a y. Try again. There exists at least one x and at least one y, such that x is a pickle and x is a pickle. What's y? Yes. Y is a bun. And is this it? Are we done? No, we want to say more things. And what? Flying. What's flying over what? Flies over. If x is the pickle, what am I? X is the pickle. And it's flying over what? What's the other thing? Y. Y is the bun. I encode x as being a pickle, basically. I assign to it being the bun, right? And then I say, well, you know what? X, the pickle, the thing that was a pickle over here, and Y, the thing that was a bun over here. It's the pickle flying over the bun and not the bun over the pickle. My friends, was this helpful? You need at least two things. If a pickle is flying over a bun, you need a universe with two different things. One's going to be a pickle, the other one's going to be a bun. And flying, is it a symmetrical or asymmetrical relation? If I fly over something, does it fly over me? It's asymmetrical. Exactly. You got it. Is this, and again, let's just check because we're ending on this. I hope this is also, in addition to being good brain workout, I hope this is fun. So you know what you got to do. What do we do next week? Ontology. We're going to wrap it up and a small logic quiz at the end. That's it. Let's get 5 out of 5 for that thing. On that note, we are done.